Hi everyone. Today I'll be looking at how to write invertible counterpoint at the octave. Before watching this video, I suggest you watch my video entitled Invertible Counterpoint if you haven't already done so, as it will give you an introduction to many of the concepts I'll be discussing. According to the inversion chart for this type of counterpoint, when inverted, most consonant intervals remain consonant and most dissonant intervals remain dissonant. The only exception is the consonant fifth, which inverts to a dissonant fourth. By relating this information to a scale, we can see what harmonic implications these inversions have. For example, in the key of C major, the octave inverting to a unison could be used on most degrees to imply a root position triad. The only exception would be the leading note, which, because it supports a diminished triad, should be used in first inversion and is unlikely therefore to contain two root notes. Of course, if these two notes were part of a thicker texture containing 3, 4 or more parts, the octave in unison could also be the third or fifth degrees of the harmony. For ease of discussion, however, here I'll only be considering two-part textures. The seventh inverting to a second implies a seventh chord in root position in third inversion. If writing in a modern style, these intervals could imply seventh chords on each degree of the scale. In more traditional styles, however, it is the supertonic, leading note, and dominant which will most often support seventh chords, while the subdominant and submediant will do so only occasionally. The tonic and mediant are extremely unlikely to support sevenths. The 7 and second intervals can also form 7/6 and 2/3 suspensions on any degree, provided they are correctly prepared and resolved. The sixth inverting to a third can imply first inversion and root position harmony. Again, because diminished triads are typically used in first inversion, use of the root position on the leading note can only occur when a seventh is included. Notice, when used with the notes of a scale, third and sixth intervals imply the chord a third below. For example, when used with the tonic C note, the submediant A minor triad is implied, and with the supertonic D note, the leading note B diminished triad. The fifth inverting to a fourth can imply root position in second inversion harmony. Second inversion harmony is obviously problematic, but can be used as an allowable second inversion chord, for example as a passing or cadential 6/4. The fourth inverting to a fifth also implies second inversion and root position harmony. If taken as part of a 4/3 suspension, the fourth will resolve to a third, implying root position. When inverted, the 4/3 suspension moves 5/6 and loses the dissonance of a suspension. The 5/6 intervals may also then imply two harmonies instead of one. In some contexts, this may be acceptable. As we'll see, often with invertible counterpoint, a change of harmony may result after inversion. The remaining columns are inversions of the first three and therefore produce the same harmonic possibilities. Obviously, these intervals can interact in more ways than simply note against note. Combinations of 2, 3, or 4 notes against one, as well as any other combination available with non-invertible counterpoint, is available here. The only difference being, with invertible counterpoint, all harmonic considerations for each combination of parts must be considered, and all dissonance must be treated accordingly. With care, the dissonant intervals can be incorporated so that bad part writing and forbidden consecutives are avoided. One way to achieve this is to place the dissonance on offbeats, or if used on the beat, treat it as a non-harmony note or suspension. For example, the following seventh is here treated as an accented passing note, which moves to a consonant sixth, and when inverted, a third. The same seventh can also be treated as a 7/6 suspension, which inverts as a 2/3 suspension. With invertible counterpoint at the octave, the 7/6 and 2/3 suspensions are most effective. The other suspensions, when inverted, either lose the dissonance or no longer behave as a suspension. For example, as we've seen, the 4/3 suspension, when inverted, contains two consonant intervals and therefore no longer contains the dissonance required. When writing invertible counterpoint, to ensure the counterpoint's inversion avoids forbidden dissonances, it is advisable to write the counterpoint and its inversion simultaneously. This can be done on 2 or 3 staves. For clarity, here I will use 3. When considering single note options to use with this initial C note, there are only 2, an octave C or an E. A G note, the chord's fifth, will invert to a second inversion and is therefore unavailable. The octave C also, while possible, sounds too bare. The E inverts to a first inversion C major triad and is therefore the most likely choice. Tying a note across a bar line is an opportunity to introduce a suspension. Particularly at the beginning of a work, suspensions help to create the move between tension and release, ubiquitous in most music. Here a 2-3 suspension is created, which inverts 7-6. In this context, the inverted harmony changes from a first inversion dominant to first inversion diminished chord. A change of harmony when parts invert is common. Notice, however, that both chords still possess a dominant function and therefore still move to tonic harmony. Dotting this D note delays the arrival of the following C harmony note, which is again written with its third. The dotted quarter note eighth note rhythm is also reminiscent of the opening rhythm. A 2-3 suspension is again formed with this tied E note. Here the resolution of the suspension implies supertonic harmony, which can be extended to include a seventh. Placing the root note in seventh with the triad's third is a common means of implying seventh chords in 2-part textures. Having the root note in third with the seventh is also common. Here the root note in seventh with third combination is again used, however the order of the root note in seventh is reversed. The seventh, however, still resolves correctly in the following bar to the third of tonic harmony. Here the seventh is resounded as an accented passing note before resolving. Here the inversion of this supertonic seventh chord is used and again resolves to dominant seventh harmony in the following bar. The sharing of figures and motifs between parts is a characteristic of contrapuntal textures and should be included frequently. Here the second inversion is taken as part of the dominant seventh arpeggio and is therefore not problematic. In this example, when dissonances are removed, harmonically on each quarter note beat, the two parts typically form third or sixth intervals. The only exception is this octave, which then moves to a sixth on the following eighth note beat. Especially in 2-part textures using invertible counterpoint at the octave, there will be a large number of harmonic sixths and thirds forming the contrapuntal framework. As here, the octave in unison may also be present, but will be less common. As we saw in the inversion chart for this type of counterpoint, the reason for the preponderance of thirds and sixths is they remain consonant when inverted. The octave in unison remain consonant also, but because of their bare sound, they're used infrequently. When writing invertible counterpoint, it's easy to give too much attention to how the parts invert at the expense of how the piece sounds. Remember, each part of a contrapuntal texture must have its own shape and possess a drive towards cadences and phrase ends. All parts must also share figures and motifs. For example, this figure is used here, and as we've seen, this figure is used here. Finally, especially in 2-part textures, care is needed when approaching perfect consonances by similar motion that hidden fifths or octaves are not created. Hidden fifths and octaves occur when the ear melodically fills in the notes between the two intervals and forbidden consecutives result. When approaching perfect consonances, therefore, it is advisable to use either oblique or contrary motion. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.